Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Braille 101 workshop hosted by Braille Literacy Canada. My name is Kim Kilpatrick. I'm the current Vice President of Braille Literacy Canada, and it's really good to have you here with us today. This is going to be an introductory workshop about Braille. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Braille Literacy Canada. You can always go to our website at brailliteracycanada.ca and find out more about us. But some of the programs we have include scholarships for people who are working on certifications in Braille transcription and those kind of things. We also have a Braille Zoomers group, which is people who are new or are starting to learn Braille to get together and help each other out with that. We have Brailler Bounce, which means that we donate used and refurbished Perkins Braillers to those who need them. And we have lots of workshops like this one, Braille Symposium, which is a whole afternoon's worth of workshops, and various other things. We also have a lot of resources on our website. So if you are new to Braille and you need resources or you're wanting to implement Braille or put Braille signs, there's lots of resources there. So I will now be turning things over to Marilyn and Diana. But first of all, please, while they're presenting, I'd love it if everybody was able to mute yourself. If you're not able to, I know Marilyn was having trouble unmuting, let us know and we can do it from our end. But if you could mute yourselves, please, that would be helpful. At the end of the presentation, we will be taking questions. So to mute yourself, if you're on an iDevice, an iPhone, iPad, it's in the bottom left-hand corner on the phone, I believe, and on the iPad, I believe it's on the top, but there's a mute button. If you're using VoiceOver, you'll hear it say mute. If you are using a computer, you will press Alt-A to mute and unmute. On the PC and on the Mac, it is Command Option A. And on the phone, I don't believe we have any phones. I don't see any phone numbers, so I think we're okay there. So we will have questions afterwards, and I will instruct you at that time about raising your hand, etc. But for now, we will just turn things over to Marilyn and Diana. Marilyn and Diana are wonderful proponents of Braille. They are longtime Braille users, also teachers of the visually impaired, and all kinds of resources when it comes to Braille, lifelong users, full of knowledge and passion about Braille, and there's nothing better than listening to them present. So I'm very excited to mute myself and hand things over to them.
Thank you very much, Kim. My name is Diana Brent. I am a retired vision teacher. I've been retired for a few years now. I still do some contract work in Braille and also assistive technology. I have only recently joined the Braille Literacy Board. I have been a member of Braille Literacy for some time, but I have not been here on the board very long. I'm also on the board of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians. So those are my two volunteer jobs. I've been a Braille user since I started school, which is probably a longer time than most of you have been alive. But anyway, that's I went to a blind school for 3 years, and then I went to public school in my home area. So I've had Braille for a long time. So I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn now, and she's going to introduce herself and then do the first section of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Diana. I'm Marilyn Rushton, and I could repeat exactly what Diana said. We sort of have a lot of the same experience in life, long-term Braille users. I've been since grade 1, and that would have been, I guess, about 1959. And this is my, I want to say, third year on the Braille Literacy Canada board, and I'm very honored to be a part of this illustrious group. I am a retired vision teacher, and I am currently doing some contract work in some of the schools in the Vancouver Lower Mainland area, just sort of enough to keep my hand in. And I am fortunate enough to be one of the mentors for new vision teachers in training. And I went to a blind school, the same blind school as Diana went to. It was called Jericho Hill. And I went there for the first 10 years of my schooling, and then went to my neighborhood high school for grades 11 and 12. That was the way it was done then for most of us, and it was in the same city, so that was convenient. And I got a real good grounding in Braille at that school because all of the resources were in Braille. And of course, then when I got into what we used to call public school, which was my secondary school, one of the biggest challenges was I suddenly had to find out what my books were that would be needed for my different courses and order them in Braille. And I have found that was a really good experience because it taught me, I think, among other things, to be a strong self-advocate. And I think I've never stopped. It's my way or the highway. Anyway, we're going to start this presentation out by trying to bust some of the myths about Braille, some of the common misconceptions. And I'm going to try not to get on my soapbox here because this is one that really, really gets me tangled up because
so absolutely outrageous. And that is the perception that we often hear, that Braille is becoming obsolete because there are all these audio recordings and there are screen readers which talk, and there's all these people doing all kinds of recordings and podcasts. Why do people need Braille? Well, in the minds of we on Braille literacy, Braille is literacy, and that's kind of a second topic, but there's more Braille available now, I think, than there ever has been. And that's
I have got this workshop, our notes, on what's called a refreshable Braille display, and that is a line of Braille connected to my computer that when I press various buttons, it changes what I can read. So anything that's text is now possible for anyone who has a Braille display to read as long as they have the right technology skills. So that's really quite fabulous. And as long as things are what we call accessible, which means it is convertible to Braille because it's regular text, it's mostly readable. And now we have not just single line Braille displays, but multi-line Braille displays that can show graphics. I don't want one because I'm retired and they're very expensive, but still it's a remarkable feat that that's happened. And then we have Braille transcription software. And what that means is a person can take a file of text or a math file for a student or anything else that is in print, run it through a program, and that will convert the text to the Braille code, and then you can hook it up to what's called an embosser, or in other words, a Braille printer, and you can get hard copy Braille out of it. So that's pretty cool. So that kind of takes care of reading. In terms of writing Braille, there are a couple of main ways that people do it. One is the slate and stylus, and that was invented by Louis Braille when he put together the Braille code. And it's a little gadget where you open up the slate at a hinge, put the paper in, and you poke out the dots from right to left through the paper with a little thing called a stylus, and the Braille comes out the other side. And you turn it over and you read it. And it sounds absolutely crazy to talk about it like this, but it actually does work. And I remember learning this in grade 3. All my sighted friends were learning how to handwrite, and I was learning to use a slate and stylus. And there were so many times that I just about threw the thing out the window because I wrote the letters the way they looked in Braille and not the reverse mirror image. And I was always getting my name wrong, and that really made me mad. But I persevered and got through it. So that is one way of writing Braille. The other way is with the use of a Perkins Braille writer, and it's kind of like an old typewriter. And I tell my students and anyone that I'm showing it to that you don't plug it in, you don't turn it on, and it doesn't have a screen. You roll in the paper, and it's got keys to write the various combination of dots with, and we'll tell you all about how those work a little later on. And it just writes Braille. But it writes Braille very, very well. And it has the great advantage of being built strong. I've dropped a Brailler down the stairs once. I was just terrified, and it still worked. And every time it hit a stair, the little bell that tells you when it's at the end of the line went ding, ding. So it was like my life flashed before my eyes, but all was well. So as I said, any accessible digital information can now be turned into Braille. So Braille is certainly not obsolete. Braille is very much alive. And another misconception is that Braille is a language. It isn't. It's a code, and it's produced in languages all around the world. I tried reading Chinese Braille once, and I couldn't make any sense out of it at all. And I guess one of the other myths is that Braille is really, really hard to learn. But if you're a child in grade 1 and you're just starting to learn how to read, I don't think Braille is any harder than print. It's just what you learn to read. And unless the student has sensory disabilities or other challenges, which certainly does happen, you can just kind of keep going and learn Braille as you need to read it. And there's lots of other differences that we're going to talk about through this workshop about Braille, but that's enough for me right now because it just sets up some of the myths that are out there. Braille is not obsolete. Braille is alive and well, and there's more and more of it, and that's why we need it in more and more places. And the better recognized Braille is, the more we'll get. So I'm going to turn this back over to Diana, and thank you very much.
Well, now we know why our Brailler Bounce program is called Brailler Bounce because of Marilyn's story. But I want to talk a little bit about, and Marilyn made reference to this. Actually, before I do that, for anyone that can see, my video is on and it's showing my fingers reading Braille on a single line Braille display. And Marilyn kind of described it. It's got Braille keys up at the top and to write Braille, and underneath is a single line of Braille. I do not have a multi-line Braille display either. I doubt that I will get one, but the idea of them is fascinating because it allows you to read, to show more than one line of text on a page at a time. But I'm going to talk about that more later too. So that's just to get you all thinking. I want to talk a little bit about Braille literacy's philosophy, which is Braille is literacy. However, it does look different depending on the demographics of the user. For totally blind children, it's literacy because they haven't been exposed to any reading or written language to understand spelling and punctuation and all of the things that sighted kids get right away because print is all around them. So Braille is vital for that group of students. For deafblind individuals, it provides additional access information and communication options because without Braille, because many of them cannot hear, some can hear some, but for them, the Braille gets their information right into their little minds and heads, or bigger, depending how old they are. For sighted users who have lost their sight but learned print as their primary reading and written medium, their needs are a lot different because they're likely more focused on solving challenges like developing a label system for kitchen appliances, food packaging, and medications, keeping track of phone numbers and making personal reference notes, and reading bus stop signs and buttons on elevator panels. Those are the kind of things that are more that group uses Braille for because they already have their reading and written language. I will go on and I'll talk a little bit about the differences between how we access information, and then I'll turn it back to Marilyn because you'll be tired of my voice by then. So one of the huge differences in terms of blind and sighted people's access to information is that for all of you on this call who have some vision or a lot of vision, print has always been from the time you were little. It's been all around you, everywhere within your line of sight. You see pictures, you see text, you see all kinds of things. But for people like Marilyn and I, and many of you on this call who are blind, if that information is beyond our immediate arm's length reach, it does not exist. Sure, we can go find it, but if there's nothing triggering us to do that, because there's not much sound in a printed text that's print, so we don't know to go and listen for it. So if it's not there, we're not going to automatically look for it. So to illustrate this, one time, and a few years ago now, I went to a McDonald's restaurant. And I was asked by the hostess why blind people never checked out their Braille menu. And I said, "Oh, you have a Braille menu?" And they said, "Well, yes." But I discovered it was on a wall, positioned in perfect sight lines for easy viewing, but not in any line of travel where customers walked. So it was not placed conveniently for accessing with fingers, and therefore not accessible for reading. And that's when we get later on, when we talk about signs, those are some of the things that are really important to note, to make sure that the signs are placed where we can read them. For many sighted persons learning Braille, you will likely not learn to read it with your fingers. You will learn to read it with your eyes. And it doesn't mean you couldn't, because many of you who have lost your vision, you can train your fingers. But I would, and I think Daphne can back me up, most sighted teachers, and my husband, when he learned Braille, learned to read it with his eyes. He didn't actually do it with fingers. Now I'm going to turn it back to Marilyn, and she is going to talk about the very basics of what is Braille in terms of letters and numbers and all of that. So take it away, Marilyn.
Thank you, Diana. I'm just going to follow up on your story about reading it with your eyes. The first day that I was a vision teacher, I went to see a student of mine who apparently was stuck on Word. And I've done this all of my life with people doing Braille, and I just, without even thinking about it, I just put my finger on his hand so he could take my finger and put it on the word he was stuck on. And he was putting my finger on the word, and all of a sudden he stopped. He was just a little boy, and he said, "Are you really blind?" And I said, "Yes." And then he just, "Oh, okay." And then he just continued on. and I helped him with the word, but I was very surprised with that reaction, and I realized that maybe there was really something to that. Anyway, what is Braille? And Braille is like every character is formed from a 6-dot cell, and it looks like a 6 the way it looks on a dice, with 2 dots at the top, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the bottom. And there are, I think it's 63 different combinations that you can use, where you use some dots and not other dots, and use them in different ways to represent all of the letters. And then there's a short form of words where you have some letters that makes a Braille word that's a common word, like AF with a space on either side is after, and AG is again, things like that. So to do the punctuation and the letters and numbers, this is how it works. For the letters A through J, they only use the top 4 dots. So the top left, the top right, the middle left, and the middle right. And A through J uses different combinations of those 4 keys to make those particular letters. Now, K through T is very similar to A through J, except you add dot 3 to each one. So it would be the top left and the top right, middle left, middle right, and bottom left dot, which is dot 3 in the cell of 6. So for instance, if I wanted to write the letter A, I would use dot 1 to write it. If I wanted to write K, which is its corresponding letter after the first 10, it would be dot 1 plus dot 3. And so that goes all the way K through T, and then U, V, X, Y, and Z are A, B, C, D, and E, with dot 3 added and dot 6 added, which is the bottom right dot. Now you're wondering what happened to W. That's because Louis Braille invented the code in France, and there was no W in the French language. So there was no W in his code. And I believe it was the American Printing House for the Blind that put it in later, when Braille was being used more widely in North America. And Daphne or anyone else, if I'm wrong, you can correct me on that. So Braille, to learn the letters, once you understand the pattern, isn't really that difficult, although it takes a little thinking about, because it is a little bit different. Now, if you want to make a capital letter, say if we wanted to use Diana, which is a name, it has a capital D, we don't have a set of upper and lowercase letters for capital and small letters. We have a 1 dot, which is dot number 6, placed in the cell before the letter you want capitalized. So I would write dot 6 in one space on my Brailler, then it would be ready for the next space, and I would write D-I-A-N-A. And if I wanted to write Ken's name, I would write dot 6, and then a K, which is dot 1, 3, and an I, which is dot 2 and 4, and an M, which is 1, 3, 4. That's how you do capital. And there's marks for period and apostrophe and exclamation mark and all those sorts of things. Now for numbers, we use A through J for 1, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J for 1 through 0. And before the first number, we put something called a number sign. And in print, it looks a little bit to me like an upside down L would look, but of course it's made by 4 of the Braille dots. So if I see the number sign and the letters B and C, I wouldn't read it as B and C. I would read it as number sign 2, 3. So I was just wondering, there's a message going on phone, and I wanted to make sure it was nothing to do with me. I don't think it is. So that NG, ER, AR, things like that, which also have one symbol, rather, wrong word, one Braille symbol to represent that. So that is a basic idea of how Braille works. And I'm going to turn this back to Diane next for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. One thing I should have told everybody at the beginning, if some of you who are newer to Braille than others, so haven't had this information before and are trying to take notes, we have a fairly extensive handout, which Marilyn and I are using to do the presentation, but we're planning to email it to all of the registrants, not right away because there may be things at this presentation we want to add, but as soon as possible. And it includes not just the text, but pictures. And for those of you who can't read the pictures, alt text, so that you know a little bit about the pictures. So I should have mentioned that at the beginning. I didn't. But this way, you don't have to madly take notes.
I forgot as well, and I meant to mention it too.
The next thing we're going to talk about is, and he's been mentioned, it's why we have this code. And it's because a wonderful young gentleman who I think was really only around 11 when he started doing this, who in 1824 invented the Braille code. This is Louis Braille, and he lived in France. And he was also an accomplished organist. So using his 6-dot cell, he developed several reading and writing Braille codes, which we still use today, including a system for transcribing Braille music, which I probably should have learned as a kid because I had a music teacher who really wanted me to, but I was a bit lazy and didn't. But there's many people now that are using it, and there is actually an organization in Britain that is championing Braille music. And there's people that are in orchestras and they read music scores, and it's really quite amazing. The thing that I found with it, and it was, unless I learned to read with my nose or my toes, I had to memorize the music before I could play it, since I needed my hands for both reading and playing. And that kind of discouraged me, but it shouldn't have. I will talk a little bit now because we've kind of gotten to the point where we've talked about the letters, the characters, about actually reading Braille. The statistics from National Federation of the Blind indicate that fluent Braille readers read 1/3 to 1/2 as fast as print users of an equivalent age. And I usually say that a fluent Braille reader can read as fast as a sighted person can read aloud, which is just another way of pretty much saying the same thing. Speeds as high as 200 words per minute are achieved by some experienced Braille readers. Braille learners are taught to read Braille with their 2 index fingers, and that may or may not show. I'm just holding them up. And you read with the pads, the tips, not the very tips, because you want to keep your fingers flat. And so that is the most sensitive part of those fingers. And we read ideally with 2 hands. And what happens, and it's a little difficult to show on a Braille display, but I can do it. it looks like in some ways you're reading with your hands coming together towards the middle, but what actually happens is you start reading a line, the right hand gets almost to the edge of the line, and the left hand tracks back to be ready so that when the right hand gets to the end of the line, the left hand can continue to read the Braille. So it can give you a rather a good flow for reading, as well as some people are. I've heard of teachers that are training people to read with their second and third fingers as well, to give you more speed. I have not done that, but I can read with my second or third finger. The other thing, at one point, it's very handy if you're proofreading something, or if you're writing something. I once had a brailer that had uh, one-handed mode, so you could write with one hand. So I could read with one hand and write with the other, which was actually useful if you had to make copies of things. Now I do it with an embosser, but at the time not. So, and people that are using Braille with one, that learn Braille later, a lot of sighted people who have lost their vision and now are learning Braille tend to only read Braille with one hand. But that's, it just depends on your usage. It's probably faster if you read with two hands. Now, I will turn this first part, the next thing we're going to talk about, and Marilyn has touched on it, so she can read or tell us what she wants to continue to leave in here for Braille writing. And then I'll talk about some of the electronic writing tools.
Thank you, Diana. And I did want to mention when Diana was mentioning about Braille music, it doesn't look like print music with all the lines and spaces, because Braille is a uniform size. And it's all in how the symbols that are common letters in words are used, the same kind of symbols that you would read in a book are used to make the notes. And you have to learn that the note is the note represented has its value, how long you hold it, how long the note lasts, and what the note is all incorporated into the one Braille symbol. And it's pretty crazy, but it does work. And I'm like Diana, I didn't like it, and I didn't use it because I found it too slow. But I also wanted to raise the point that when people are reading Braille and the reading speed we've talked about, there's a big difference in that Braille is all one size. We have some symbols that tell you about fonts and bold and italics and underline, but like the rest of the Braille text, it's more Braille. It's not bigger. It doesn't really stand out the same way that print stands out. Braille can be made to stand out for a reader if there's a space between the lines to indicate a change, if the headings are indented, or perhaps if there is a blank space at the bottom of one page and you turn to the next page and you see what looks like a full page of Braille, that can indicate that there's a new section. But scanning Braille is not the same as scanning in print, although, as I say, there are techniques to be learned and little boxes where they put text in it that can be an indication of something that's maybe more important or set apart. And let's see now, where are we here? We were talking a little bit more about writing tools, and I'm going to give you a little bit more about the slate and stylus, because it is a very strange looking gadget. And I loved Diana's description of it. She wrote this out, and I thought it was really describes it better than I've ever seen it described. And it's what some people call a blind person's pen or pencil because it's small and you can carry it in your purse or your pocket. So the slate is made up of two pieces of metal or plastic, depending on the kind of slate you have, connected by a hinge at one end. The top piece consists of rows of rectangles the size of a Braille cell. Each rectangle overlays a grid of 6 indented dots for each cell. To write, a piece of paper is placed between the two layers, and you working from right to left, the user punches a mirror image of the character into the paper using the stylus, which has a sharpened point which forms dots on the reverse side of the paper. And then to read the writing, the paper is removed from the slate and flipped over to read the Braille on the other side. And so you've got slates that will fit an 8.5 by 11 paper without changing its position. You've got one-line slates. You've got short slates. There's fancy, crazy ones that you can push buttons in and out and make a number that you can just leave on your slate till you don't want it anymore, and you erase it and you put the next one. I don't know how to use any of those, but I know they exist, and it's kind of fun. And I've talked to you a little bit about the Perkins Brailler, which is the one that looks like a typewriter, and it is the most, well, it doesn't look like a typewriter, but it kind of acts like that. And it is the most common way of doing hard copy Braille by hand. And it's got a space bar in the center of the keys, and then, and this gets a bit complicated. I'm going to start again and tell you something that I explained earlier. When you're looking at a Braille cell, the dots go, the two at the top are 1 and 4, the two in the middle are 2 and 5, and the two on the bottom are 3 and 6. So 1, 2, 3 goes down the cell, 4, 5, 6 goes down the other side of the cell. When you're using a Perkins Brailler, the keys go across. So on the left side of the spacebar, you have dots 1, 2, 3 going across, and on the right side of the spacebar, you have dots 4, 5, and 6. Then there's a key that makes it backspace. There's a key that changes the line, and then there's a thing at the top called a carriage, or I think it's got another name, and I can't think of what it is right now. But when you get to the end of your line and the bell rings to tell you that if you write anymore, you're going to run out of paper, you have to slide it back by hand. So it is, you do everything for it. And the head punches the characters through the paper as you press the keys to write. And it works extremely well, but it is not like the Braille note takers are now, not like our Braille displays, but it works like a hot damn. I got my Braille writer when I was 7 years old, and it is still going strong. And Diana, did you want to talk about embossers? I think you're the expert.
I can. Oh, am I? Okay. Well, for people who are doing a lot of Braille, actually, I'm going to step back. When I first went to public school, they had volunteers that brailled all of our books, and volunteers are still used today, but we also have paid transcribers who have been trained to write the Braille code and do it on a computer. But at the time, they had people using those Perkins Braillers Marilyn and I just talked about, and those people were often in prisons. They use prisoners to Braille, and I think sometimes they still do that. And so every page of Braille we got was hard copy Braille because there were no Braille displays then. That Braille was punched by hand. Today we have Braille embossers, which are like big printers, and they can be purchased. They're expensive, but I have one because I do Braille transcription. Marilyn has one. They are so individuals can purchase them. Schools now purchase them because most of the students, whereas when we went to school, we went to the blind school. Now a lot of the students, unless they have multi-disabilities, are going into public school from grade 1. So we have teaching assistants and teachers of the visually impaired, which Marilyn and I did. So that helped produce the material. So the embossers connect to the transcription software that Marilyn talked about. And those embossers then can crank out many copies of the same text for different students. So we have there's several types of them. Some do double-sided. Actually, a lot of the books, most of the books we read are with Braille on both sides, and what that means is the dots are kind of interlined between each other. For a sighted person, they hate it. You almost have to hold the page up and see the shadows of the dots because you can see the dots on one side and the holes on the other, which makes it hard to read. However, for a totally blind person, those holes that are coming up through the other side of the page, you never see them. And so we like hard copy Braille on double-sided most of the time. And my embossers print double-sided. Marilyn's only print single-sided at this point.
It
But
does.
yeah,
But it
so
meets my needs.
exactly. That's so we use the embossers. And modern technologies, like the display I'm using is a single line. We've talked about multi-line Braille displays, which have 8 to 10 lines. And I may as well mention them here now because the wonderful thing about a multi-line Braille display is that you can now read graphics take the picture. Now you have to make the lower density of less detail than in a lot of graphics because remember, we're still only reading with those 2 fingers. We're not reading with our eyes. We can see more of a graphic now on a multi-line Braille display. Great for reading spreadsheets because you can see more than one line of text on a page. And there's about 4 different kinds of Braille display or multi-line displays is what I'm trying to say. The most current one, well, I won't even say most current, but a lot of the school systems have one called the Monarch, and it's a desktop model. And there's pictures of these of one in this document that will turn your text into graphics. It's so early days for these multi-line displays. They're just starting to get them to work with screen reading software so they'll attach to your phones and your tablets. There is the Cadence, which is it's actually 4 separate little displays that you can attach together in a line left to right to get, I think, about 80 cells, or you can put 2 on top of each other. And then so you would get a block of 2 sets of 40 cells. I have not seen one of those. The other one is the DotPad X, and it's more the shape of a tablet. It's about the size of a regular iPad, it is a writing tool. It has no keys, so you can't write using the DotPad. However, you can use it with connected to a computer, and then you use your computer keyboard to do the writing, and that'll put it in. But the really cool thing about multi-line displays now is that you can connect them to a computer or an iPad, and you can have somebody draw on the iPad, and the picture comes up instantly on your multi-line display, which is amazing for things like a mobility teacher wanting to draw a map, say, or you want to get somebody just showing you a math equation, or that. Let's see, what else would we use them for? Those are the two big ones. Before that, graphics always had to be done by hand in some kind of hard copy tactile format, which is really labor intensive. Now, we've talked a little bit about the resources that we have been able to read. I'm reading this document, and the thing that I found discouraging is I wrote it and now I'm reading it and I keep finding mistakes, which you wouldn't necessarily find as easily. It's possible if you use speech screen reading software, but now I keep finding mistakes that I want to fix because I've got my fingers under Braille. Braille is great for reading knitting patterns, crochet patterns, woodworking books, reading novels. I love reading novels in Braille. And I've talked about proofreading. We access spreadsheets and tactile graphics. We also I've talked about all of the Braille displays. The final thing with Android and iOS devices, phones and tablets have software built into them, allowing Braille users to form the letters on the screen. So you hold the phone in front of you and you hold your hand, you tap the forms of the letters on the screen. They pop up in print as soon as you type them, because Marilyn explained a little bit that we have two systems of Braille, alphabet Braille and a shorthand Braille that we call contracted Braille, which makes it faster to write. So instead of having to use the phone keyboard or hook up a Braille display like I have here, you can do what's called Braille screen input on your phones, and it's fabulous. I love it because it means I don't have to take my display. I can tap using my finger. I don't know how people do it with two thumbs, but anyway, I can tap on the screen and type the actual letters. What happens is when you do a letter, your speech inside your phone tells you that what you've put into the Braille. So you do hear what you're writing. I think that's pretty much all I need to say about electronic tools as an overview. The next thing Marilyn's going to talk about is labeling systems.
One of my favorite topics. Before we get to labeling, I just wanted to mention too that with all of our speech systems and Braille displays, certainly I found that this is the way I like to do things on the internet, like email and looking for recipes and looking up a book to see if that's a book that I want to read. And just for balance, I wanted to mention too that I still enjoy reading books for pleasure using audio. Like I like the Audible app, not just because of the words, but because of the type of narrators that they have. So it doesn't mean that we're never going to be using audio. It means that Braille needs to be recognized as the way people will really attain true literacy if they haven't learned how to read print, because of the spelling, the punctuation, the format, the way things are paragraphed, headings, and all that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that none of us are going to be using audio anymore. That's not true. It's all the tools in the toolbox, and the Braille is a very major tool. And for people who are learning Braille as adults, this is one of the things that I think is important for people to realize, is that labeling things can be very, very useful, like food packages or things like spice jars and file folders, CDs, and medications, and there are labels that are used to make board games and other kinds of games, and there's playing cards that are all labeled with the suit and the number of each suit that they belong to. So there's all kinds of ways to do labeling. Now, if you're doing your own labeling, and yes, you are right, you have to be able to know, you have to be able to write enough Braille to be able to create the label you want. And I know that when Diana and I first got married, she gave me a really good idea for a system. We made some labels for cans, and they had a Braille label on the top. Underneath was a magnetic label that was stuck to the label that was brailled, and we would put them on cans. So we didn't have to make new labels each time our cans ran out. And that was really, really a neat way to do it. And then we can use Dymo tape for labeling. There are adhesive plastic labels. You can use sheets of paper that you can roll into a brailer, write on it, cut the strips off and take the backing off. There's labels with sticky back that are little squares that you can write on and stick on things. And so there's all kinds of ways to label. Braille isn't the only answer. I laughed when we were talking about this workshop because Diana put this in. This is my guilty secret for telling red wine and white wine apart. I put elastics on bottles of red wine, and as long as I ask the right person, I usually get the right result. For people who maybe aren't at the point where they can write their own labels yet, there are stick-on little dots that you can put on. I have them on my washing machine and my dryer and my oven to indicate little states for different degrees of temperature, different settings on my appliances. And basically anything that you want to know what it is, you can find a way to label it. There's puppy paint that can be used. We see that done a lot for students. If someone wants to make a diagram that's a little bit more tactile, let me see, just anything that you don't know what it is. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that if you've got an open package, you can open it up and do a little sniff test and see what it is. You could shake it and see how it rattles. There's all kinds of ways other than labeling in Braille. But the fact of the matter is, it's the good way to know exactly what you've got. And there are electronic labeling systems. There's color identifiers, and there's pens like the Pen Friend, where you can have a recording of a voice that reads the digital label, and then you can press a button and it says it. And I haven't had one of those, but they are kind of fun. And those are the main ways of doing it. And I'm going to ask Diana to talk about one of her favorite labeling systems. It's called Script Talk. So over to you, Diana.
Okie dokie. Well, this moves into what Marilyn has started to say, because many of the electronic labeling systems, they can be standalone, but they can also be apps on an iDevice or Android device. And one of these is Script Talk, and it's made by Envision, and it's connected to pharmacies. So if your pharmacy is part, and a lot of the Canadian ones are, of like I know Safeway Pharmacy, London Drugs, they all have them, and I know there's other ones too. But basically, you go into your pharmacy and you tell them you want a script talk label put on your medications when your prescription drugs. And so they program the label, and they're actually they do quite a good job, although I got one bottle that said this label has not been programmed. And basically what you do is you open up the script talk program on your phone, and this works for Android or iOS, and you hold the bottle with the label facing your camera, and it will read all of the information, not just the what it is, but it'll give your pharmacy name, their phone number, how much you take of each one, any directions, and it's all on this little tiny label on your medicine bottle. And you can actually, the script talk program, or I mean, you can also get a machine that will tell you about script talk, or I mean, do it standalone. So if you don't have a phone or don't want to use your phone for that purpose, you can get a standalone machine to do it. Now, did you want to do the games, Marilyn? I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
sure,
okay,
I'll do that. And
okay,
I'd
go
like
for it.
to ask you a question about script talk. What kind of information does the labels provide?
Oh, well, yeah, they provide all of the type of medication, the amount you take, the name of your pharmacy, the phone number, and the prescription number so that you can independently phone and have that prescription refilled. All of that information is on the labels.
And we've included all these in your resources too, so when you get the handout, it will be there for you to have a look at. So back to Braille games. That's the recreational part of Braille, which is really important. And I have always said that even though Braille looks like learning the code and learning all these combinations, that's only part of being a Braille user. It's the fun of playing games. It's being able to get information that you want to get and might not otherwise be able to get. And there are lots of different games that have been adapted for Braille readers. There are Braille bingo cards, and they're a wooden board. At least I think they're wooden. No, I guess they're plastic now.
They're
plastic boards, and they have 5 columns, and the first one on the left says B, the next one says I, etc. And all of the numbers under each of those columns are the ones that fit under those letters. So you have to read really quickly until you get the whole board memorized, and put your little bingo chip on the one that they've called, and then of course the fun part of it is checking whether you've got a line or the kind of thing you want to have to win bingo without knocking any of the little bingo chips out of their position, and then you have to start all over again. Anyway, that's just the fun side of playing bingo, but it is fun, and it's really neat that you can do that. And I've mentioned Braille playing cards. There's games like Uno, Monopoly has been done, Scrabble is available in Braille, and all kinds of other games that blind and sighted people can play together. And there's more of them mentioned in the handout, and there's a bunch of resources to tell you where you can get snakes and ladders. And some of these websites that do games, they change what they have, and sometimes the websites become obsolete. And so we've got those, but often the easiest way is to just go into Google and type the game that you want. And one usually has to pay for those, but there's resources like the Braille Superstore, and there's another one that's called OZ Games or something like that. And CNIB Smart Life Store, they have a few of those kind of games, and it's fun to be able to use those. Oh yeah, I just found it. It's called 64OZ Games. I don't know that it's supposed to be ounce, but maybe it is. And I think that's basically the information that I've got on games. I'm looking at another resource here. There's one called MaxiAids, and they have games and they have various appliances, and they're an interesting website to look at if you're looking for something that's been adapted for someone who is a Braille user. And I think that's all there is for that one. And I think, Diana, we've got you for Braille signs.
Apparently. So we've, in print, signs can be big, small, but remember that in Braille, signs are still, the printing on the sign is all one size. I went to a hotel once and I saw this weird, and then they'd done it with nails and they were the right shape, but they were huge dots. I had to move my finger all around to read each one because they'd done the room numbers on the doors in with using nails, but huge, which was actually almost impossible to read. But there is a conundrum for blind people, and we've talked about this today, because if we're not aware that there is a sign, we don't necessarily know to look for it. So if you're a library or you're a store or you are some public-facing business or you just want to put signs, hotels, on washrooms and such, it's good if you put on your website, Braille signage is available, is here. And then we know, because we can go to that website and we will know to look for the signs. The other important thing about Braille signage is you want to put it near what you actually want it to tell you about. So it doesn't work to put the sign across the room from the door, because maybe I can see it with an arrow, but that's not going to help me find that particular route. That I think they say about 50 millimeters is ideal. 150 is too far away. So you want to have, the important thing about signage is that if we realize and we start looking for it, and now, because they're starting to have more signage about, I do tend to look for it more than I used to, because it was never there, so I never looked, but now I do. But really, it gives us independence, to be able to find things out for ourselves, and not, especially in unfamiliar environments. So I was so proud because my daughter worked at a museum and she was a designer. She did a whole art demonstration. And I didn't tell her to do this, but she came to me one day and she said, "Mom, can you give me the right size to do Braille?" And she had brass plaques made for all of the names of the dinosaurs in the museum. And then she had little relief shapes of the dinosaurs put on the signs next to all of the exhibits. And I thought the cool thing that I thought was, wow, I didn't even ask her to do that, but she did it. The
And it's
other,
fabulous.
yeah, the other thing about signs is that if you're going to do print and Braille signs, include both Braille and high contrast raised print. This approach adheres to universal design principles, enhancing inclusivity by merging multiple modes of access. So you want your signs to be high contrast for the print user and nice regular size Braille for the Braille users. Now, we also, eye level is a little high to reach. Now I'm holding my hands up, and to read, I've got to tip my hands back and it would be easier if I could put them down lower, about chest height. I think there is a, a designation in the handout that tells us how far how high you can put them, because you also want to have it so it works for people in wheelchairs, or you want to have other people be able to read them. But there's an excellent information set on the Braille literacy website, and a lot of it is in this handout. And I'm realizing, because we really want to leave time for questions, that I'm not going to go through all of this now, but it'll definitely be there. I think I will quickly. Do you want to do the libraries, or do you want me to do it, Marilyn?
Well, I think probably if you can do the libraries, that'd be good. And
Okay.
I just wanted to make one more point about signage. And this was brought home to me because of what happened in a school in Vancouver. It's really important to have signs proofread by someone who, or Braille signage proofread by someone who knows Braille, because I heard one story of a high school in Vancouver, a brand new high school. They wanted to do signage in Braille, and they did. They didn't ask anyone. And all of the number signs, remember I told you about a number sign which differentiates letters from numbers, and they hadn't put any number signs on any of the room numbers. So instead of saying number sign 105, it would say just AGAJE, because A is 1, J is 0, and E is 5. And that is really difficult when you're trying to teach someone Braille, encourage them to use Braille, and the Braille they see around them is not correct. So if you're doing signs, please get in touch with Braille Literacy Canada. Find someone who can proofread this for you before you actually make the signs and go to that expense to make sure that they're done correctly. Thank you, Diana. Over to you.
Okay. And I think that's also true for low vision users. Make sure that the contrast is right. Like all of these things are there and it does mention this in the document, and I didn't. But anyway, let's talk about it is so cool now that we can actually sometimes go to a public library and find books in Braille, or at least we can order books in Braille through our public library. And I want to talk a little bit about what alternate format materials are. They are books, magazines, and other resources made available for reading using speech and large print, speech screen readers, which means the speech is on a screen is spoken, Braille displays, large screens, and a variety of audio devices. They include, but are not limited to, the following categories. So we get hard copy and electronic Braille, that's an alternate format, large print, accessible digital formats such as Microsoft Word, EPUB, PDF, DAISY, MP3, and a variety of other audio file formats. And the coolest thing, which isn't in this handout but will be, is there's something called DAISY books. And I'm not going to go into it highly here, but they allow us, normally it's hard with an electronic file to skim when it's in Braille by headings and lists and all of the things that we'd like to. But now with this new DAISY format, we have a new form called eBraille, I think it's going to EBRF actually, and it's going to be able to allow us to skim through documents so that the way a sighted person skims and says, oh, there's a big heading, we can do navigation commands and skim from heading to heading now too. So that's very exciting. Some of the libraries that are resources for us are the National Network for Equitable Library Services, which is NELS, and it has a page for librarians, books in alternate formats, and general tips for making libraries more accessible. And I put the link there. There's also January is Louis Braille's birthday, was on January 4th. And so they have a whole page for National or World Braille Day, sorry. Then we've got the Center for Equitable Library Access, and that's called CELA. And it's the public library service for Canadians with print disabilities, which includes hard copy Braille and downloadable electronic books, newspapers, and magazines in all kinds of formats. And if you have a print disability, you can access this. They also include Bookshare, but you can also go to Bookshare on its own and access books. If you do it through the library, the CELA library, it's free. If you don't, you do have to pay for it. It's a yearly subscription, but they have all kinds of electronic Braille and other formats for you. And accessible libraries is the final place. The one other thing I want to mention is that you can purchase books in hard copy Braille and other digital formats from places like the National Braille Press, Seedlings, which is you can get free books for kids from there, American Printing House for the Blind, and there's Twin Vision Services, which I didn't include in here, but I can. We have, let's see, do you want to do the educators, Marilyn?
Sure. We've talked a little bit about the need for Braille and audiobooks and balance. So sometimes for educators, and Diana and I are both educators, as is Daphne. Well, I think everybody's an educator in this group. Often people think it's going to be easier to provide their blind student with audio resources, and it sounds really good, but it's doing them a very serious disservice because although they need listening skills, as we said before, and we've repeated and repeated, they need to develop those literacy skills of taking information in through the spelling and the punctuation and just the experience of reading Braille is an active learning experience where if you're listening to an audiobook, it's fun, but it's also it's passive. So reading, writing, and spelling is really important to do all those kinds of things. And another reason it's really important is statistics show that 90% of Braille literate blind adults are employed. 90% of Braille literate adults are employed, compared to only 33% of those who do not know Braille. So, of course, as you can see, this correlation underscores the importance of Braille literacy for employment outcomes. It's strongly linked to higher education attainment, better income, and overall life satisfaction. So the audio seems like a fairly easy route, but it's not. And we know that sometimes the audio is the only thing that you can get. So of course, it's better than nothing at all. But whenever we can, we're going to choose Braille for our Braille using students. So
Perfect.
shall we go to questions?
Yeah,
Maybe,
we're going to go to
Diana?
questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to do questions. So we will turn it back to Kim and Daphne. And thank you both all very much for putting up with us for the last just an hour, over an hour and a quarter. And because I do want to make sure we get questions. So
Listening to us stumble through a whole bunch of knowledge in a short time, and thank you.
okay.
So thank you to Marilyn and Diana. You packed a lot into this presentation. It's amazing how much information there is. I echo all of what you said. I'm a Braille user since I was 5 or 6 or something. I love it. It's my go-to. I'm hosting using a Braille display right now. It's easier for me to do that than using a screen reader. I mean, using just a screen reader. I totally agree with everything you said about Braille. So if you do have questions or resources to share or comments, if you could raise your hand, that would be wonderful. So in order to do that on an iDevice, you will see again, well, let me check it again. You have to go into more now because there used to be a raise hand and now there isn't. So, oh no, you go into reactions, and under reactions, the raise hand is there. See, it changes all the time. That's what the thing is. So, if you are on a computer, it is Alt Y to raise your hand. On the Mac, it is Option Y. If you can't raise your hand, you could just unmute yourself and say your name, and we'll take you in the order that you appear to us, or you're either heard or visible to us. If you put something in the chat, we could monitor that, but it's a little bit easier for us if you would like to raise your hand and ask a question. I'm waiting here. I would like to ask one question of you both, and I know you both said there's more Braille. You feel that you're using more Braille than ever before, and I feel the same way. I went through a Braille drought for a while because Braille devices are very expensive, and I didn't have one for quite a while, so I had to use audio. So I went through the Braille in the wilderness, and I'm so glad that I have so much Braille. Um, I think you might have mentioned it, but I was kind of zipping around helping people a little bit. And um, I just want to also point out that hard copy Braille is so much bulkier than print.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have students or you're getting books for people, well, a couple years ago, I got a hard copy Braille book because I was kind of testing quality of Braille from one of the libraries. And the mail person brought it was like 3 boxes of books. And he asked my husband about it, and what is this? And he said, oh, just a little light reading. But it was like one book. And it was something like 18 volumes. So if you have students or you have library patrons and you receive, or your student is saying, what chapter do we need? Because I remember in high school, my student, I'd say, what chapter are we doing? He'd say, bring the whole book. I'd say, it's 23 volumes. I can't, like, but they didn't know that, right? They didn't understand that the Braille book was so much bigger than the print. But with electronic Braille, it is not bigger. You can just bring your display and go read. So that is a very cool thing.
Thanks, Kim. We'll add that in.
We got a few hands up
We have
here.
a few hands now. We were waiting for the hands. So we have Don first, and then Mohammed.
Hi everyone, Dawn here. Thanks so much for again putting together this workshop. I've had a few new tidbits and takeaways, so I appreciate that. I'm wondering though if you can specifically share the stat that you actually just mentioned a few minutes ago. Said you had mentioned that 90% of Braille literate people are employed versus 30%. Who don't know Braille. Where does that stat come from? Do you remember?
I think that was from the National Federation of the Blind in the U.S., isn't it, Diana?
I think that's where I found it in a couple of different places.
Yeah.
One said 85%, the other said 90. I actually Googled it and I just put statistics for Braille reading versus non-Braille readers in employment. And I got the same stat from several places.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I've gotten this stat over several years, and the numbers really haven't changed as much as I would like. It's just quite sad. Thank you for
I think,
asking that, Dawn.
yeah, this was a
Thank you.
2020 stat that I pulled. But
I
yes,
saw it in the UK as well. I'm not sure StatsCan has any information. I don't believe it does, but you could also look in StatsCan under the disability survey. That's not the name of it. What do they call their disability stats? But if you go to
Yeah, I can't think
StatsCan
of
and
it
look
right.
under,
Yeah, I've been there before. I know what
yeah,
one you're talking about. I haven't looked at it in a
yeah.
while, but yeah, it would be, yeah, just interesting.
I
So
When
just
thank you
don't
for
know
that.
if they asked that question in StatsCan, though. I'm not 100% sure.
when I
Mm,
asked this question, and I asked it of a longtime vision teacher, a UBC faculty, University of British Columbia faculty advisor, I asked if there was any difference in the Canada-US stats in that regard, and she said no, it's exactly the same. But I
yeah,
don't know the numbers.
I think it's definitely a, a, a could very much be seen as a global statistic. I'm sure it would be
Yes,
similar
it is.
in many countries around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the last thing I'll leave you with too is I know most of you are not familiar with who I am. But I work with the Touchpad Pro Foundation and the Braille Doodle, which is a very new resource.
Oh,
And I know I've met with
oh,
Daphne,
yes, we've
so I
seen the
do
Braille
hope.
Doodle.
Yeah, I do hope that each of you, our paths will cross sooner than later, and I hope I can get a Braille Doodle in the hands of all of you because, yeah, I
Oh,
would
that
love to.
would be
Obviously,
amazing.
I'd
Yeah.
love to have conversations to again include that in this type of beginner resource
I
workshop,
should have
which
put that
is
in
wonderful.
because
It's okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
should have put it in because I know about it. And if I was a teacher, still like full time, and they're not that expensive, which is the other cool thing about it, I'd have it now
Oh, well,
because
thanks, Diana.
I
Send
would use it all the time. But
Well, send
um,
me an email, Diana, and we'll figure out how to get you one. We're going into our
So
next
Dawn, one
manufacturing
thing
run,
you
so
did, so one thing you did, Dawn, was you rescued us last year at our AGM for BLC. It was
oh,
in the most complicated hotel that I've ever experienced,
oh,
Marilyn would say. And someone drew me the lobby. The lobby was a weird shape and the thing, and they drew it on the doodle. We had a doodle. We had a Braille
it
show
was
and tell at the AGM, and one of the things that we had there was a doodle. We had a
oh,
couple of doodles,
it
and
must have
someone
been
drew the
Daniel.
lobby shape for me, and that helped me quite a bit to understand the lobby. So
Oh, it
you
was
actually
No,
crazy.
saved our
wonderful. Thanks,
navigation a little bit from that. So that's very
Oh,
nice.
thanks, Kim.
You're
I appreciate
welcome.
you sharing that. But no, and again, I felt it was really important for me to come hear your messaging. I'm a new member to the Braille Literacy Canada crew, and I just really appreciated everything that you shared today. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you, Dawn.
thank
Thank you
you.
Thanks,
very much.
Dawn. Thank you, and thank you for the doodle. Mohammed is next, and then Monica.
Thank you. Yeah, hello everybody. This is Mohammed speaking. I am completely blind and blind since birth, so I've been reading Braille pretty much since I was 3 or 4 years old. Um, one of the things that I see a lot, I do work for a fairly large organization that serves blind people, and the vast majority of the clients that we have are older, um, 65 plus, and they don't know Braille. They are not in a position to read print anymore, and nor do they have the desire to learn Braille. They think that they don't need to read anymore because they have people around them, if they're lucky enough to have, who read everything to them that they need to know, and they just don't see the value in reading. And frankly, oftentimes I hear, "Oh, I'm just too old to learn this stuff. I can't, it's too much for me to deal with." So how do you what's your response to that? And this is, I would say, overwhelmingly the messaging that we hear from 70 plus, I would say 70
Yep.
plus individuals, um, you know, live
My,
in rural
sorry.
and urban areas predominantly, and just kind of have this mindset. So that's the first question I have. The second thing I wanted you guys to weigh in on is, I would say people that are more middle-aged, say 25 to 45 or 50, who've lost their vision. They want to learn Braille, and they want to learn more about Braille. And I understand that there is the Hadley courses that people can take, but the thing is, a lot of those correspondences are done online, and a lot of the people are just not technically very savvy, and they would prefer to have it more hands-on and to do it and to be taught how to read Braille in person. And they're finding it quite challenging to get that because Hadley, of course, doesn't provide that. And so I wanted to know what your advice for people like that, like who they can contact, what they can do to get some help learning Braille.
Those are good questions.
Yeah.
They are hard. To answer the second question first, there doesn't seem to be as many resources out there now as there used to be for individuals learning Braille at a specific institution. I know our Braille Zoomers doesn't do that because it's online. But the other thing I think is for older people learning Braille, maybe it's okay if they don't want to learn it, maybe they aren't missing out. I can't believe I'm saying that. And I think the important thing is to make sure they know about resources like Braille Literacy Canada and and impress on them. And also if you can find a peer mentor in the same area, even if it's somebody they can talk to by phone, I think that helps because it may give them the motivation to. And I think actually some of Hadley's courses, there is phone access to them because
Yes,
they have.
there is.
There is. Mhm.
There is for
There
sure.
is, yes.
It's not
They
just
have mentors, like they have people that help them with their lessons on the phone. So you can, it's not in person, but there definitely is. Can I also jump in because I was involved with the Zoomers since the beginning, and I think one of the big misconceptions is that people think that if they're learning Braille, they're all in to learn to read novels. And maybe after a certain age, like where we talked about the labeling, like if we say, well, if you just learn your elevator buttons, that's Braille, right? Maybe you just want to learn to play cards, that's Braille. So I think that people get worried about it being hard or they're all in. But I think once you explain, it's like pick the thing you want to do and learn that. You don't have to read a novel in Braille. Now I know people in their 80s who have gotten to that. I definitely know them, and they did it every day and they worked at it and they wanted to do it and it was a big priority for them. I know people way into their 70s and 80s, but I think that frees people up to feel that they can just learn their elevator buttons or their cards to play crib or something. So I think that's a good message to send. I believe that makes people less nervous. They think, oh, but yeah, cards. Oh, I want to do that. And then maybe they get their cards and they think, this isn't so bad. I think I'm going to label my kitchen. So we've had people in Zoomers that have gone to that degree as well, I think. And the Zoomers also help. There are a lot of people that are taking Hadley and they get that monthly support help from the Zoomers to encourage and to talk about issues they're having. So it's not maybe ideal, but I think it helps. I don't know. Diana and Marilyn have also led the Zoomers, but I do find that people feel more comfortable with the Hadley when they know they have a community of support here.
I could jump in here. We've got three more hands, and we're getting near to the end of the presentation. Please, if you have questions that are not answered, send them to info at blc-lbc.ca, and we'll get back to you, but I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kim, for the questions.
Yeah, so we have three more hands. So we have Monica and then Michael and then Nancy. So go ahead, Monica.
Hi, I'm an adult learning Braille. I learned with the support of my vision loss resource, my ILS instructor. But so I have, is eBraille just when you're reading it with a Braille display, or is it something beyond that? And I'm curious if there's like, you find any noticeable difference in like how much you remember, comprehend when you read like Braille versus listening to things.
That's a really good question. eBraille, in terms of if you see it, it would look just like Braille. But the difference, it's the same shape, it's all of that stuff. But the difference is how you navigate within the various sections. So eBraille means you would read it on a Braille display. But you would be able to navigate differently than just sliding your hand down a page and looking for a heading or a list or whatever. You can navigate more like on the computer when you are surfing the web or doing any of those things where you have the special keys strokes you can do to skim and move around a document. So that's the nuts and bolts of eBraille without getting into the weeds, I think. And your other question
That was about comprehension.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
know.
thought you can start if you want, Marilyn, and then
Well, I know that just speaking for myself, I need to see the words under my fingers before I can really remember something that I have read. That's why I tend to read audiobooks for pleasure, and everything, if it doesn't matter, I'm just enjoying a book, and everything else that's a work document or something specific to a person, I read it because it's the way I learn.
A manual, for example, I want to have in Braille.
So
and we don't always get them, but I want them. And recipes are handy to have in Braille. Because although their step-by-step nature, it's not something you would necessarily just remember. Now you can get them in audio too. I know lots of people who do it that way, but knitting patterns, all the things that I listed are things I want to read in Braille. But like Marilyn, I think a book, I like reading in Braille, but I also, if I just want to read a book at night, I might just listen to the audio book. And actually, it's funny because I went through a stage in life where every time I put on an audio book, no matter how good the narrator was, I fell asleep. And so it was a great way to go to sleep, but it didn't help my reading of an audio book. But then I kind of got through that. And so then I was reading any books I wanted to read in Braille if I actually wanted to read them. But now I've gone back to reading pleasure audiobooks.
That's a great question. Great question. I've heard also that visual learners, if you were a visual learner with sight, you tend to prefer Braille, like for that, like, because I know adults who learned Braille and said, well, I couldn't listen to audio. I had to, in order to concentrate, I had to really have Braille in my hand. So
I think
congratulations on your Braille journey.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
It was my first Braille. Braille was my first reading medium, and I think that makes a difference too.
Yeah.
So I just
two more. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Kim. Let's do the next person.
Well, go ahead, Marilyn. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to mention. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention that sometimes when someone is really resistant to learning Braille, I just put some Braille in one place to let them know that what they're reading, what they're feeling, has to do with them. And here's your information source. This box is yours.
That's good advice. Michael and then Nancy. So go ahead, Michael.
Hello, I'm Michael. I'm from Victoria, BC. I'm a mature adult, and I've been very tech savvy with learning technology with VoiceOver on my iPhone and my MacBook computer. And then I was curious to learn more about Braille. So my Braille journey first started with CNIB Victoria, and they had a Lego set with just huge numbers of the alphabet. And I kind of started off with that, just with large letters. And then I was involved with Elizabeth at Pacific Training for the Blind in Victoria. And there was Elizabeth, there was Heidi, and Mitch. And all three of them helped me print out the alphabet. And then I was trying to combine simple words together, and they would use the Perkins machine, if I've got that correctly, to type out
You
things on
have.
paper. I would take it home, and I let go of the Lego because it was too big, and I needed to be in the real world small. Um, and I worked really hard for months to get the alphabet memorized and become proficient. And I had the people, Elizabeth and Heidi, punch out things on paper where the the um, the letters were like had a little space. So I got pretty good with spaces apart from things. And then I was ready to progress with simple words like man and other just three-letter words and combinations. But between those, each of those words, I needed a space. And so I got pretty good at the alphabet and some simple words with them spaced apart. And then I progressed into and actually Heidi would have, and Elizabeth had a little book, and they would sit beside me, and I would go along with the book. But the problem came is that I was, I got, I don't know if I call it, I don't have narrow, thin fingers, but I have kind of thick pads. And my whole profession for my whole career has been a physiotherapist, and I've been a registered massage therapist. So I've used my hands all the time, but I've got thick pads on my fingers. So when I came to reading Braille with maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, maybe letters to the word, if they were too tightly together, um, like the normal Braille, they're tight together. And so I initially asked them to type out words, but give me a space between it. And I was doing kind of not too bad. I could do it with a little space, but I realized that takes up too much space on paper when you do that. So when the letters are really tightly together, I struggled. I had to kind of move around the letter to make sure, and then I had to, in my mind, spell it out. It was just kind of um, excruciating painful. I don't mean it. It wasn't really that bad, but it was really tough. And so I progressed to a point where then I just kind of um, like even at night, I try to just have these words printed out, and I would have like a full page of words. And I'd ask them to space some words with a space apart, and then the whole word with it all together. And um, I don't know, I struggled. I gave it many months of really hard work, and then I gave up. And um, And I'll also tell you, I got the Hadley helps. I got all their manuals for all the letters and alphabet, and that was a good kickstart. But Elizabeth having the personal help was much more beneficial. And I think Elizabeth at Pacific Training were kind of disappointed that I kind of like was making good headway, and then I kind of gave up. And then I got to the Meta AI glasses, and I had them read A-frame signs and numbers, and I use voiceover and the technology, and I have audiobooks, and I kind of gave up on Braille. So I don't know if you have any words of encouragement for me, just giving you an idea of what I've gone through to this point. And I actually really enjoyed the brain work. It really exercised my brain, and I enjoyed that part.
I would say a couple of things. You might want to come to because you're tech savvy, you could come to the Zoomer session because your journey is very similar to lots of other people's journeys. First of all, it's okay to give up, but if you're not wanting to give up, then there's other things like there is a system and it's not commonly used. But if you wanted it, if you're not trying to read a book, but you want it for just your own use or for labeling, there is a jumbo braille. So the dots are just a little bit bigger, and you can get slates and styluses, and there are actual Perkins braillers that do
There
jumbo
are,
braille
yes.
as well.
Yeah.
And so if you want that kind of braille and motivation for your own purposes, that would be one thing you could do. But I would say come along to the Zoomers and just talk to other people, because you're not alone in that frustration. That's where a
Exactly.
Yeah,
lot of
that's
people
right.
are at.
And Michael, Daphne just reminded me, and I know that the Brailler Bounce program has issued a few jumbo braillers,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that if you did want to register to get a brailler, and especially ask for jumbo braille, it might take longer because there's fewer of them. But jumbo braille, could be an answer for you with your bigger fingers. It's possible, yes. I'm cognizant of the time, and we do have one more hand, but uh, I just welcome everyone. If they need to go, we could take Nancy's hand quickly, but if you do need to go, before we take that hand, I just want to thank everyone for coming. If you do need to slip out, because I know we're over time, but
We are,
it's been such wonderful questions. Nancy, if you want to quickly ask your question or make your comment, then that will be the last hand we'll take
Am I
today. But
unmuted?
yeah, but anyone
I,
who has other comments, questions, wants to register for Zoomer or Braille Bounce, please email info@blc-lbc.ca. I want to also thank Diana and Marilyn so much, and Daphne for taking notes. Um, so go ahead, Nancy. Yeah, go
I want
ahead.
to say thank you, Diane and Marilyn, for doing this. Quick question. I did do the Hadley's one, but the thing is, they went all the way up to the end, like the first level, and I couldn't do the second level because it was stopped on the phone, and I got more confused, and it put me back, and it made me feel that I didn't have more confidence what I was doing.
Mm.
But then I want to get to Victoria, but it was a bit far for me for the Pacific Training Center. But the thing is, when you talked about the jumbo braille, where do you get those jumbo braille? Because I have a habit of reading something, and when I go back, I can't get back to the story I read, and I'm more or less reading something that I don't know what I'm reading. Like,
That's also a very common experience, Nancy, and we
and
could
I'm a
talk about
beginner.
that in Zoomers.
Yeah, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
a beginner
Yeah.
person, and someone told me a couple months ago, why are you learning Braille? Everything's all electronic. I said,
Oh,
I
for
lost
goodness
my
sake.
eyesight really bad, and now I'm confused, and I'm trying to do
Yeah.
everything at once. But the sad thing is, I got one of those flight machine, and I didn't know what kind of paper use. And every time I press on it, it's a very thin paper, and I got confused, and I said, I gave it up, and I got, like today, for instance, I used my pill. I almost used the wrong pill. I said, Kevin, tell me about. I don't know what pill I'm eating. And then now you guys brought it up. I should ask the pharmacy to tell me, because I'm taking too many pills right now for my health. But the thing is, I'm giving up. But I want to do Braille so bad. I got to learn. And this is
Well,
I'm glad I got on today.
with
Thank
it.
you.
Keep on with the Zoomers. Yeah, keep on. And Script Talk would be good for you, probably.
Yes, and I'm glad I'm with this
So
group.
that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for everyone here. Thank you to Daphne so much for taking notes, and for our presenters for really giving us a round the world tour of all things Braille.
We did.
That was a quick trip around the Braille world there, and it
Thank
was
you,
really wonderful.
everyone, for coming. It was so nice of you to take time out of your day, and don't hesitate to contact us at Braille Literacy Canada. This is the reason we're here. So you're it.
And
And have
everybody
session
will
2.
be receiving this presentation in a handout that Diana and Marilyn have put together. It'll be emailed to you. please send your questions to info@blc-lbc if you have them, .ca, because we'd love to see you.
Yeah. And if you want a Brailer, you want to put your name on the list for that or join the Zoomers or anything like that.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks,
I hope you guys
everybody.
have session 2 again.
Oh,
Well, thank you again, everyone. And thanks to everybody for taking time to be here with us today.
Yeah.
mhm.
Thanks,
And-
Diana. Thanks, Marilyn.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye.